The Triangle Shirtwaist Company was a 10-story high building off of Washington Square in New York. It was the largest textile factory in New York City at the time.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Company had in their employment several hundred young immigrant girls, most of whom were adapted to the English language. Their workdays began at 6 in the morning till 9 at night, and this was repeated 6 days a week. Even after this tedious workload, the girls' wages were only $1.50 a week, with no extra money for supper and no overtime pay. During their workdays, they received no breaks and were not allowed to sing or talk to each other. These rules were strictly enforced.
On November 23, 1909, 20,000 young women and girls protested for better safety regulations and higher standards of sanitation in garment and clothing factories. The Triangle Shirtwaist Company were one of the only companies to ignore their requests. On March 25, 1911, as the girls were finishing their workday, they heard someone yell fire. Soon after, people walking onto the street noticed objects falling from the building onto the streets. As people got closer, they realized they weren't objects but people that were falling onto the ground. Engine 72 arrived first, being only 6 blocks away. The men had to dodge the crumpled bodies lying on the ground in order to get to the fire. Soon after, Engine 33 arrived and realized their aerial ladders could only reach between the 6th and 7th floors, and their hoses could only reach the 7th floor. This was a problem since the fire started on the 8th floor.
The fire had taken little time to race out of control. All the panicked girls rushed towards the door, and they couldn't get out because the doors opened inward rather than outward. After several minutes of desperately trying to open the door, the girls ran toward the nearest exit, only to find the doors chained shut. They had nowhere to get out.
It took the girls a while to find an unlocked door, and they began to rush towards the streets, their clothes and hairs still on fire. Hundreds were still trapped upstairs. 3 male cutters had formed a human chain from the factory to an adjacent window across the alley. A few girls were able to get across, but then the men soon lost their balance, and the 3 men fell to their deaths on the pavement.
A lot of girls who jumped came from the 9th floor. The flames from the 8th floor quickly reached the 9th. The women raced to the east inferno, but by now it was too hot. They called and screamed for the elevator operator to come up, but when he did, he could only take a handful. He later said that as he was going down the elevator shaft, he heard bodies hitting the top of the elevators and saw blood dripping down. Later, the police found 25 bodies on top of the elevator.
Firemen later said that they had found 19 bodies melted against the locked doors. Also, 25 bodies were found in the cloakroom with their hands covering their faces from the flames.
All in all, 148 men and women died in the fire. It took about a week for all the family members to claim their loved ones. Some were never identified. Angry at the company's negligence, many families filed a lawsuit afterwards. The lawsuit was filed against the owners for not listening to the employees' grievances about the better safety and against the fire inspector, Fire Chief Croker, for not correctly coding the building. The owners were found not guilty, but they had to pay $75 to each family for their losses. As a result, New York City changed fire code regulations, and doors in any factory were required to open outward and to never be chained closed. The Ladies' Garment Union Workers was created.